Hello, everyone, and welcome to our next edition of the Burnout Talk series. My name is Georgi Kolev. I'll be your host tonight and for the event. I would like to start with some brief introduction about DigiBurn and also the purpose behind this video series for those of you who are watching for the first time. DigiBurn is a digital healthcare, actually therapeutic platform, which is aimed to diagnose and early stages of prevention for the burnout syndrome. It's also, as an objective we had in maybe some of the near future, is to help support recovery, again, from the burnout syndrome, and also support patients or anyone who is on that road with treatment. The purpose behind this video series is actually to raise awareness on the topic and also discuss it from different angles in order to gain some perspective and more broader understanding of what actually burnout is from medical, psychological point of view, also sharing stories on an individual level, on an organizational level, in order to maybe help reverse or at least affect that trend which we saw in the recent years of rising number of cases that we had. So on that note, I would like to present our guests tonight and actually give them opportunity to present themselves, because I think that way will be more appropriate. Starting with Bogi Eliasen. Hello, Bogi, and welcome. Thanks for being our guest tonight.
Thank you. So, my name is Bogi Eliasen. I'm the Director of Health at the Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies, and we work a lot with applying technology that is here, but also concept and really focusing on quality of life and well-being during the lifespan, and having in mind that our lifestyle causes a lot of health issues, both on the behavioral side, but also burnout is a huge part of causing a negative well-being.
Thank you, Bogi. We'll be having a discussion a lot more in depth in a minute. Moving on to Lene. Hello and welcome. A few words about you, please.
Thank you very much, Georgina. I have a background within clinical psychology, where I've been engaged in quite a broad spectrum of disciplines across different contexts related to mental health during the last 15 years. I'm very passionate about promoting a more person-centered and more holistic and integrative solutions, not only within healthcare, but also across workplaces, the educational system, and so on. I've also been a lot involved in psychological assessment and also been transitioning more into the digital health space, developing and delivering different e-mental health solutions and so on. And I think the topic of today's session is very timely, especially since around 1 billion of the world's population is thought to have a mental health condition, and that was before the pandemic, and yet only 2% of health budgets are spent on mental health globally. So it's really important. I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least, moving on to Lars. Lars, hello and welcome. A few words about you, please.
And thank you for having me. My name is Lars Mønter. I'm with the Danish Committee for Health Education, an entity in Denmark that works to support self-management, self-care, and health literacy for, Danes. Managing your entire life often requires a lot of different skills, and dealing with adversity of various kinds is one of them, however much we like it or not. And that might be sometimes dealing with stress, anxiety, depression. It might be physical elements of your health, but regardless, the skills that you need to overcome some of those adversities, how you deal with either managing your work-life balance, managing living with an ailment or an illness with your family and so on. Those are things that you can well, at least try to manage, try to upskill over time.
Yes, thank you. So, because we're more or less branded or dedicated this edition to the Nordics region, I would like to start the discussion maybe with giving some first more general and then specific information. In your opinion, was there any traits or let's say cultural characteristics which result in personal traits for the people within that region that can serve as a risk factor within or for developing the burnout syndrome? And also after that, I would like to go on and discuss maybe those characteristics which can help in prevention and also to support recovery from it. Maybe continue with Lars, because we have that discussion prior to the interview, and then move on to Lene, because you've shared a lot of interesting ideas on that topic before that.
Well, I'd love to, but well, you can see the pandemic as a giant lens with which we saw, well, certain flaws of various kinds in the Nordics as well. There are certain traits in the North revolving around having a high degree of personal responsibility, of feeling a high degree of personal responsibility for your task at work. So whether you are sitting at your workplace or at your computer at home, you feel that you need to dedicate your life to delivering on those tasks, even though you're suddenly also stuck with managing your children's homework, a different setting with your family, with shopping, managing all kinds of other problems. You still feel you need, as a good knowledge worker, to apply yourself a lot, and that certainly within a situation where you have suddenly a completely shift in your work environment, that gives a good environment, if you will, for burnout also.
Yeah, it also contributes here, yes, in terms of organizational traits. Maybe, Lenny, we can give us a broader perspective on that topic as well.
Yeah, actually, I saw some study on this from 2019. It was a study from small business enterprises where they kind of estimated the risk factors in European countries. And actually, Denmark was on top one of the least risk, and Norway was third. So I think there are maybe less risk factors in Scandinavia, but there certainly are, like Lars mentioned, the sense of responsibility. We have a very kind of strong feeling for solidarity. In Norway, we call it dugnad. It means to really work towards a common whole, or to give your contribution to the whole. So I think that is also a factor that is contributing to this, and also kind of feeling that you have to deliver, being quite perfectionistic, often to feel that you can't let your colleagues down, like Lars mentioned. Also, I think it's a quite heavy digital load in Norway, or in Europe, like in the Nordics in general, that contributes to a stress. You have kind of a constant stimulation, which creates a lot of inner stress in the brain and body. So it's very easy to get entangled in digital devices, to feel that you have to be connected all the time, and so on. So it's been a lot of digital meetings also before the pandemic. So I think that's some of the factors. And also, I think maybe we kind of feel like Lars mentioned, that work is really a part of overall life. And people tend to measure their value on how much they do, how much they achieve each day, and so on. So it's easy to get stuck in the hamster wheel and compare yourself to your colleagues all the time. So it can be a bit individualistic focus at times, although we have the collaboration element as well. So yeah, and I've also seen this in my clinical work, that it's a lot of stress and burnout, and it's certainly been an increase in this during the last year. So the pandemic has certainly had major effects on this problem. So it's a lot more to do.
Thank you. That was really interesting again, and I believe also for the audience to hear. Bogi, my next question is towards you. You have a lot of experience in the public sector as well, or working with institutions. In your opinion, what is the role of institutions, whether being government institutions or even organizations like nonprofits or any other types that have more of an impact on society in terms of creating a support environment for preventing burnout?
Yes, I think that we these things that Lars and Lena mentioned are also on a macro level. So society has changed to become very digital very fast, and not a very well-known reason why the Nordic welfare states developed was because there is this concept of developed by the philosopher and priest Grundtvig, on when you moved from a peasant society to a urban society, you made what you in Danish called high school. So these are like where you can take courses without examination. But the whole idea was to educate people to be able to handle city life. And I think that the change we saw there from being peasant or working in the rural areas and coming to the city and being able to handle that new circumstances is probably the same revolution in living that we are seeing today, going from analog to digital. But nobody is doing this help for people in it. So I do think, coming back to your question, that your working spaces, your schools, do have an obligation to play in with this, but also the syndicates, the unions, to help having a working environment where we develop these things, but also likely to be alert on when is there a danger of burnout, because what we're also doing is that we are still keeping a mindset of industrialization in where our workspace is much more on a knowledge way, where you can't produce in the same way. And then of course it's the whole civil society at the side. But I do think that if we want to work on thinking in lifespan, thinking about prevention in health, not just treating when something is wrong, it can not only be up to the health system to work with it. It's the system as a whole, where we also probably would need to find a balance with that workspaces also take their part of the responsibility. But that model is going to be different depending on where you are in the world. In the Nordics, I think it should be possible to push some of this responsibility, or have the employer, being public or being private, to take a part of this responsibility. But likely also the unions should play a part here. And one actor that I really think will become more and more important in having a more stable life that can help both to recreate from burnout, but also prevent it, are the municipalities, who are the ones that can give good living conditions in where you are.
Thank you. And now I would like to move on to maybe that part of the personal traits or characteristics or even cultural traits that actually can serve as a preventive measure or can be used in terms of raising awareness or understanding on the topic. It's actually, this question is open for both three of you. What do you think are the main personal traits of people living within that region that can serve as a preventive measure or has the best potential to do so?
Well, it's not necessarily to stay within all the other topic, but I agree completely with Bogi that there's a macro level here. If you translate that into the micro level, we need more supportive management, as Bogi said as well. You have a cultural trait in Denmark where you place a very high amount of trust in the individual worker, and that trust is one that they then translate into doing a lot, taking initiatives, but they need still in a digital space a supportive management. Finding that new type of supportive management is also what Bogi is referring to. We need a different mindset in order to survive in the digital space as opposed to the old one. The flip side of it is, of course, that you also have a very autonomous workforce with a high level of trust, able to find new solutions. And I think you can see a lot of instances where good and dedicated both workers with the unions are finding new collaborative spaces because they do take initiatives. So that's the positive element of it.
Yeah, I actually very much agree. Also, we have the flat leadership structure in the Nordic countries, much more, where the trust and the transparency and so on is very highly valued. And we need this kind of humble leadership, which we often have, like all are equal, all participate to the whole and so on. And also, I think there are quite high awareness on mental health in workplaces compared to other countries and so on. So I think we have a lot of opportunities also in Norway to inspire other countries to lead with example, so to be. And also the flexibility can be helpful, the openness, inclusion and so on. Even though we have seen some inequalities more, that's also affecting the workforce. It's been quite hard hit on many business sectors and so on, which gets more stressed and are faced with more insecurities. We also have the support element and the collaboration element very strong in the Nordic. I think that's really helpful with awareness, because we need to acknowledge something, a problem, to be able to change it, and that is it's really, I think it's quite openness and awareness. Like you can reach out to your boss and communicate, and you can feel free to take initiatives on your own and so on. So the flexibility helps a lot, and also to be able to contribute on important decisions concerning your work. We also know that is a very protective mechanism. But of course, there are individual differences. Some try when they have more structure, they have more input and so on, and others try while they can be quite free and work from home and so on. And another element is our close link with nature, I think, because we need a balance between work and spare time, and we can go out and we like to be in nature and go to the mountains and just be outside and connect with nature. I think that's really important in these hectic city environments and so on, to prevent these issues. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, this is also very insightful. And I also wanted to ask that question just because I got inspired by what you said. And also we had it in the pre-discussion, I remember, about the discussion that we have here in the EU about the right to disconnect. And what is the status, or maybe your opinion on it, regarding the Nordic region and how it relates to the culture of work?
Yeah.
You want to start, Bogi?
Yeah, I can start a bit broadly, then the other ones can come more precisely in. I also think it's probably also about how do we use digital technology. There's a lot of discussion on automation and digitizing everything, and it tends to go in between only having physical work or warm hands, as they're called in the Nordics, or going almost just AI. And there is a combination in between two, which I think also relates to what is this right to disconnect. But there's another element here which I think, if we want to work with this sphere, is that if we go back to the numbers that were mentioned before, that we only use 2% of the health budget to mental challenges. If we want to work with these mental challenges, we don't have the workforce to do so. So how can we also be smart with the digital? So not just see the hassle of the digital, but also the smartness of it. And a part of that is also, of course, also a disconnection in certain ways. Yes, but even if we preach it all the time, I don't see many people practicing it.
No. I certainly agree, Bogi, and I think you have some views on that as well, Line. But I think in the Nordics we do not talk that much necessarily about. We don't consider the right to disconnect per se as a element in itself. I think we do realize that certainly we have the right to disconnect, but we would never dream of doing it. We would simply feel that we were missing out or doing something morally wrong by disconnecting, because we should be connected. So that's one element in the discussion about the right to disconnect. It's very different in the Nordics, I think, than it is further south. But another element that when it relates to both what Lene said about going out in nature and what Bogi said, maybe we should be better at disconnecting in terms of changing our culture of meetings. Why is a meeting 60 minutes? Why isn't it 45, 40, 30? Why don't we disconnect and then go out, have a break? The digital culture is also very physically stressing, and we should disconnect more frequently. We should use that extra time. The digital culture has a high productivity. We need to reclaim some of that to also maintain or take care of some of our physical needs as well.
Yeah, very much agree. We kind of need a digital hygiene, I would say, to improve it at least. To have the balance, like I said, it creates a lot of constant stress and information overload in the brain and the body. So to just be able to focus on one thing at a time is like a privilege these days, because you have so many distractions coming all the time, and that's also creating this inner stress. Often we look more at the external factors that's more visible, but the kind of constant stimulation creates a lot of like chronic inner stress. And also all the alerts, you feel you have to know about everything as soon as possible. You have alerts from social media interrupting in your work and so on. So people need to try to stop to multitask different digital devices and try to at least focus on one at a time. that can be helpful, and also maybe have like a time limit on how often you check at least social media and things that are not work related during the working hour. So to try to sharpen your focus, it's a lot of people have ADD, attention deficit disorder, and it's also a lot because of the constant stimulation and distractions that we are faced with. So I really believe that companies should have policies for these things, especially how many meetings are conducted through digital devices and so on, to try to have some balance in actual meetings, and also the time and so on, and also be able to take breaks going out and kind of manage your time more flexible will also help in this regard. So we have to be aware and very conscious about how we use the digital technology. It can have a lot of opportunities also to support mental health and well-being, we know that, but it is with what awareness is it used, which is really key. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And on that note, Lenny, because we have this in the we talked about it in the previous discussion. What other things do you think it's applicable for the organization, or whether being a corporate one, or doesn't matter what type of organization, but what can be applied in terms of regulation in order to support and serve as a preventive measure? Because it's usually this topic of discussion gets a little bit neglected or left out, and we tend to focus more on the individual level, but maybe for organization there are some best practices that can be applied, and also to be realized as the responsibility of an employer in order to support the people and the working environment in which they perform.
Well, if I may,
yeah.
I think Bogi's point before is very at the core of this. The point about going from a peasant society into an industrial society, that it needed a different mindset. That's also the same problem here. If you assume that you can go into the digital arena without a change of mindset, that's where you're wrong. So point number one for these organizations is to realize that this is not the same as before. You have to do something differently. You can't simply do as you did before. You can't have meetings continuously. You can't continue to have the same type of 9 to 5 attitude and so on. So realizing that you need a different way of doing it, that's number one. Secondly, perhaps, well, going back to what we talked about, the right to disconnect. The right to disconnect is about something that the individual does. How about the right to disconnect your workers, if you will, in the sense of choosing certain culturally elements? I think Lena mentioned it well before. If a company chooses not to receive emails at all every Tuesday or every Thursday, or for that matter, between 10 and 12, you can choose as a culture certain things that stimulates or helps the rate of burnout, if you will. You can also choose the opposite, of course, but there are certain elements where you as an organization, you can do stuff that changes the culture, that changes the framework.
Yeah, I can just, yes, I think it's very important. So for instance, when I go on vacation, which is not often enough, I normally have an auto reply that says that I will not read your emails. And then you don't get the 10 following emails, why didn't you respond? So there are a lot of these things where we actually can protect ourselves. But I think it's probably too cheap to say that it has to be the institution only. It has to also come from the individuals themselves to want to have a life where you, as Lars was saying before, are willing to miss out of some action that happens online.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Sorry.
It was just a short comment that some of us still have some learning to do when it comes to that. Please, Line, do go on.
Yeah, I really think that organizations should develop policies for these things, and also, of course, action those policies to kind of offer different interventions online, workshops or mental health interventions, buddy teams, support groups, peer support, and so on, to really help create the balance and prevent these issues. And I also believe that organizations should take some part of the responsibility, because I strongly believe that workplaces is really important, an important arena where mental health should be on the agenda of the strategies and their solutions and so on throughout all of their operations and so on. That will not only affect the job satisfaction, it will also increase the productivity, it will increase customer satisfaction, and so on. So it's really important to see that investing in each employee's health and well-being is really investing in the organization also as a whole. And the individuals are just an extension of the organization. So we need a whole person, whole organization approach, and even whole society, where we really look at how we can contribute to the whole when it comes to preventing these issues. Both individuals and organizations needs to take part of their responsibility. I think it's important with the awareness, because only when you have the awareness you can have the actions and see the opportunities and see the value it brings to everyone.
Yeah, if I can. So I think it's basically also a question about dignity and respect for individual persons. So severe burnout is extremely hard to recover from as well. So one part is what we think about in the workforce. Another part is the respect and dignity for every individual person in it. And Lars and me are actually working with doing some teaching for high schools in Denmark, where we take some of this resilience things into it. So it's probably also something we should have into schools.
I can certainly agree, Bogi, that this is, we shouldn't consider, Bogi is both right in the terms of this is not just something for the organization, it also requires the individual. It's also something that even though we would like the quick fix to be here now, we should realize that this takes a lot of time. We should educate not just on the use of digital tools, but also on the use of not using them. How do you either stay away? How do you educate towards understanding the fear of missing out? Perhaps, I guess, Line has some tips on how you can actually manage that particular issue. But it, again and again, it's not necessarily about only getting people digitized. It's also about getting them to get the digital health literacy that gets them to survive that meeting in a positive way.
Yeah, I really believe that we need solutions that have a long-term focus, and also that individuals, it's not only for the short amount of time that you engage with these devices or mental health programs, digital solutions, apps, and so on, to increase your knowledge about these things. There are certainly parts of cognitive behavioral programs, for example, both offline and online versions of these. But the aim is really to equip the users with skills and knowledge that they can use and implement in everyday life, from day to day, and also in the long term. So it's very important to have the long-term focus and see it as it's kind of both giving them the skills, also to prevent future issues, but it's also a kind of empowerment, where they will again contribute to the societal knowledge, because it's more about learning and acting on kind of becoming what you learn. So also inspiring others and so on. So it will have positive ripple effects. But to have the awareness around how these devices are used, and we really need the evidence base. A lot of apps don't have the right evidence behind it yet, at least. So it's a lot of work to do there to ensure high quality and safe solutions. And I think it's important with the balance between the individual, the organization, and the overall society, to kind of see it as co-creation or collaboration. We also know that the concept of co-production is very important, especially within healthcare, that you engage the users in developing the different tools and solutions, and really have their feedback on how it's experienced and so on. And we really need to keep the human aspect very much alive in this. Digital skills will certainly be important in the future, but interpersonal skills will also very much be very much needed to balance out. So that will be sought for through organizations and through future jobs. You need empathic dimension, compassion, to be able to really support people, and it's so important to keep this aspect alive also in the digital solutions. So there's still more work to do within this area.
Yeah, but yes, definitely. But it's also a really beneficial that is within focus, and it's actually a lot of awareness already present in there, so it can be worked with. I got told that Bogi is now has to leave, so I want to thank him for being our guest tonight, and also for sharing his perspective on that topic. More information about him will be given in the description of the video, so everyone who has some questions or want to get in touch or follow his work can do so via LinkedIn profile and all the other channels of communication. Thank you, Bogi.
Thank you very much. Really a pleasure.
But touching upon what Lena said, is a very core issue that doesn't necessarily relate to the individual or the organization, but to the tools. Co-producing them, yes, that's a key element, but looking at a lot of different tools that we use, either health apps or other types of tools, we should perhaps also move towards a different understanding of what we use them for. If it were a drug we were talking about, of various kinds, I'm not talking about narcotics, but pharmaceuticals, we would also be monitoring side effects. We would be monitoring effects of various kinds. We would be verifying if those effects were still there. And we would constantly also monitor how the overall balance of using different types of pharmaceuticals in combination would work. We don't do that much with digital solutions of various kinds. So a different approach to both the development, that it has an element of ensuring that there's a user involvement in the production and development. That's a very good idea. Having some kind of mechanism where we assess the different solutions differently and also monitor them for effects and side effects. That must be some of the core issues or elements if we also want to use data about the digital to improve our health. We're using all kinds of tools in various ways, and we also, if you will, we have all kinds of theories and myths about the effects of them. Then we're really stuck in a rut when we also try to create a new type of culture to survive it. And I think Lena will agree that for all kinds of treatment options, we need better, hard knowledge, data about what we're doing and how the tools work in various ways.
Yeah, I very much agree. We really need a strong evidence base, and I think all the most serious developers of the more comprehensive digital solutions, where you often have like a platform with stepped care programs. You might have them in both guided by a therapist or self-directed. They need to, first of all, be based on evidence-based methodologies, for example, like cognitive behavioral therapy, but they also need to be tested within the digital framework. So constant testing needs to be done on also the user experience and affect not only the symptom reduction, which is used a lot these days. You might answer a mental health check before the assessment or the treatment starts, and then you have like post-assessment to measure the symptom reduction. But health and well-being isn't only symptom reduction. We also need to see or look at other ways to measure it, to kind of look at increased mental health or increased well-being and so on. So you kind of have different dimensions of health. And I think this is really changing the way that we are conceptualizing and assessing, measuring these things. So I think it's really, really important to have a strong evidence base, and also to be have like an ethical mindset and use ethical regulations and so on in the development and implementation of such programs, to not cause the harm, further harm and so on. So it's really important, these aspects. I agree.
Well, two elements that I think are quite promising. One of them is an initiative coming out of Norway, Lena's mother country, the Nordic interoperability project, where they try to create a Nordic approach to assessment of especially health apps to begin with. But over time, it would probably also assess different types of digital tools for effects, for side effects as well, and for other stuff of user friendliness, health literacy, digital literacy, data security, other elements of that. The Nordic interoperability project is certainly one to to be quite positive about, because we suddenly have an approach where you at system level try to engage to raise the quality of the tools that we use, and thereby also perhaps lowering the negative effects of that. And the other positive thing that I am personally working with is creating a toolkit for better development of digital tools, how to integrate users for that in a European project where we are trying to see how we can do sort of, when you have a streamlined production of pharmaceuticals, you have a process with which you know that it will develop a good drug. How do we do that with digital tools? Again, to lower the side effects, the burnouts, for instance. I can see there's a question in the chat. I'm not sure whether that's, I guess that might be a good question for Lena more than me.
Yeah, can we see the question?
Well, I can see it. Yes, that's a question.
So I'll say the question. Hi, speaking of evidence-based approach, which biomarkers would you suggest for assessing burnout and mental health?
Biomarkers is my main area of expertise, but first and foremost, we need to focus on the psychological aspect, I think. But of course, like cortisol levels and every measure that can indicate some level of stress and so on. But there are also brain chemicals you can measure. But there are a lot of debates around this, like the neurotransmitters, how big role it really has, like the serotonin or dopamine levels and so on, which are really affected in the different mental health conditions and so on. So I think it's a lot of possibilities and a lot of hope about finding like the perfect biomarkers for kind of pinpointing the exact diagnosis. But we also need the human, the competence and also experience to kind of discern what is what. I think we shouldn't only go on these biomarkers. But I know Bogi certainly is engaged in that area. So
true. Perhaps though also on a more sort of circumstantial evidence kind of way. One element that we do have better data on would perhaps be to be more mindful of looking into sleep patterns. It's not technically perhaps considered a biomarker, but most of us would have a monitoring device of various kind, or could have, for our sleep levels. So in a company, you could monitor as a group, not at an individual level, but you could try to assess sleep levels of various kinds. And you could probably see both by variation, are people actually sleeping longer or shorter? Is there enough deep sleep or not? What are the patterns over time of these? And clearly, if you have a deteriorating sleep pattern for your organization, then you have a marker that something is awry.
Yes, that's very true. You can use aspects of sleep, and it's already used a little within cognitive behavioral psychology, actually, and also like breathing patterns. You can practice to breathe in a certain rhythm, and you certainly have digital devices and apps assisting with it, and that could give valuable input as well. So, and it will help the individuals to manage their health on a daily basis more, to have the feedback. But I think also it's good to not have the overload of constant feedback, because then it gets kind of like an obsession a little, and you can also have anxiety around it a lot if you see fluctuations in levels of stress and so on, or heart rate and so on. So we need a balance there also to have a healthy use of it, so it really has a true value, not only because it's fancy or high tech, but it really needs to have a true value.
Well, there's another question in the chat, but adding to Lene's point, one element that we've argued today in a Danish policy media is about the positive side of generating a population level lab collecting some of these data on sleep or other data, because we need to know more. When we talk about what biomarkers would we suggest, well, we don't know much. We have some ideas. We should stop having ideas and start studying instead, collecting some of these data, knowing much more about who sleeps when and where, what's the heart rate of them, what happens to their stress levels, what happens to their BMI, what happens to a lot of different things. We have much better measurements of them. Instead of guesstimating, we should know more. That's one element. And I guess for the question about the role of digital therapeutics, Lene know much more about that, but I see it as certainly a positive role. It wouldn't help, of course, if the digital would be a constant reminder to say relax, 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 relax. It probably wouldn't work. But of course, it can really do good, introducing elements that can help people with mindfulness exercises, perhaps locking them automatically off for hours so that they are unable necessarily to connect and thereby be stressed. There's a lot of opportunities, but as a therapeutical tool, I guess Lene would know much more than I would.
Yeah, I think it's really promising, and it's been used a lot also within cognitive behavioral solutions, internet-based ICBT, where you really have different programs that are specialized towards, for example, stress and burnout, and it very often have both the treatment, the therapeutic aspect to it, and also a long-term prevention and also health promotion focus. The cognitive behavioral approach is quite broad, so you have a lot of room for different tools, like Lars mentioned, the mindfulness tools and so on. So it's really effective actually on stress conditions. So it has a really big role, and also the organizations can invest in such tools and solutions to make them more available, or at least bring a choice for their employees to have the ability to use these tools if it's needed. So I believe it plays an important role going forward when it's used with the right awareness, when support is available. You can have a choice between doing the self-directed or self-guided programs, or you can have follow-up and feedback from a therapist through the journey. And you also have a very visual representation of the journey, which can be very motivating for very many. You kind of see the different steps and the different modules you're going through. You can track the results of the assessments between each module and so on. So you have more like a visual representation of your own care journey, and it really it kind of promotes the user engagement in their own health, and that is really important to not consider people only as a passive receiver of a health solution, or whether it is traditional care or it is online internet-based solutions. They very much need to be empowered to take more ownership of their own health process and so on, but also have the right support needed when they need it, so they have a freedom of choice.
Well, very well said, Lene. I think and that is the key role, I suppose, of digital therapeutics. It can actually do that. It can support people to feel more empowered, to visualize the journey, to track their own progress, and that is some of the key elements that a digital can do, often better than a sort of a traditional treatment, and that is a very vital and good role that it can play.
Great, thanks. Yes, the key actually, I believe so too, is in balancing the two and not over expecting impossible things from each part, but maybe see them working holistically and synergetically together. Because we're reaching our time limit here, maybe a few words as a closing remarks on the topic and what solutions or maybe best practices you can share to encourage other regions as well, or even organizations to encourage and to implement in prevention and raising awareness.
I think the flat leadership, like you have in the Nordic, and also practice and reward principled leadership, where awareness around these topics are promoted, and also see that we need the balance, we need a holistic approach, an integrated approach towards these issues, and to really kind of have a collaborative whole person, whole organization, and whole society approach moving forward. And I think it's a lot of opportunities coming from digital health, but we need the balance again. We need the right awareness. It's really key how we navigate these upcoming innovations and at heart also, that organizations really can support also the solutions that have the evidence behind it. So openness and inclusion, transparency, empathy, support. We need the interpersonal skills moving forward, not only the digital skills and focus. Digital cannot solve every problem with burnout and stress and so on. So we need integrative, balanced focus.
Completely right. I would say one thing that we're working with in the Nordics is something we call the Nordic Health 2030 movement as well, where we try to act, get our act together across borders. That approach to deliberately work across borders to solve the solution, that is an advice I would give for other countries or other regions. Deliberately try to solve your solutions by working across a border. It gives a different, slightly different approach, a slightly different mindset on some of the same solutions, some of the solutions that you're trying to find. You can be very blinded by your own culture, by your own organization, by your own problems, and fail to realize some of the perhaps sometimes obvious solutions. Solutions are never really obvious, to be honest, but at least it gives a different approach to finding those solutions. So working cross-border, regionally, or just deliberately in any kind of way is really a good idea. And of course, I'm a very passionate European as well, as much as as a northerner, but that's something that you can definitely use at the EU for. But the Nordic Health 2030 movement is not something that stems from a European collaboration. It's completely voluntary. Others can do so too.
Thank you both so much, and this was really interesting and insightful as well, I believe, for our audience. Thanks again. Information about our guests will be included in the description below the video, so you can follow their work and also get, if you want to get in touch with them. As always, I would like to encourage everyone not to be just passively entertained by the information, but rather take some proactive action on it and use it, whether being sharing the video or commenting or even liking. It doesn't matter, but that's the way to reach out to more people and actually be beneficial to them as well. Thank you again for being our guest and being with us tonight. Would like to stay in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.